The last time Precious stood in front of this mansion she was broken. Shattered into pieces so small she didn't think she'd ever find them all. But today, 3 years later, with her 4-year-old twins Caspian and Celeste holding each of her hands, she's not the same woman. Today she's the one they should fear. Inside that mansion right now, her ex-husband Donovan is celebrating his engagement party. Champagne flowing, laughter echoing through halls that used to be her home. They have no idea she's here. They have no idea what's coming. But before I tell you what happens next, let me take you back. Let me tell you how the woman they discarded like trash became absolutely untouchable. 3 years ago, Precious was 32 years old and living what everyone called the perfect life. She was married to Donovan Hart, a 38-year-old tech entrepreneur worth over $50 million. On paper they had everything. The mansion, the cars, the status, invitations to every elite event in the city. But behind closed doors, there was a quiet desperation growing. For 5 years, Precious and Donovan had been trying to have a baby. 5 years of negative pregnancy tests. 5 years of doctor appointments, fertility treatments, and hope that kept dying month after month. 5 years of Precious watching Donovan's disappointment turn into something colder. Something she couldn't quite name. She told herself it would happen. She told herself love was enough. She told herself that the man who once looked at her like she hung the moon would remember why he married her. He was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Precious's world ended. She'd left work early because she wasn't feeling well. Just she thought. The fertility treatments were taking their toll. She walked into her bedroom, their bedroom, expecting to find it empty. Instead she found her husband in bed with Sienna. Sienna who had been her friend. Sienna who had planned their wedding. Sienna who had sat across from Precious countless times, listening to her cry about not being able to get pregnant, offering tissues and sympathy. Precious couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what her eyes were showing her. Donovan didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He got up, pulled on his shirt and looked at Precious with eyes that had gone completely cold. And then he said the words that would haunt her for months. "I need a legacy, Precious. You can't give me that." Sienna sat up in the bed, Precious's bed, and placed a hand on her stomach. A stomach that was slightly rounded. Precious understood before Sienna even said it. "I'm 3 months along," Sienna said quietly. Not apologetic. Just stating a fact. 3 months. They'd been doing this for 3 months at least. While Precious was taking hormones that made her sick. While she was going to appointments alone because Donovan was always too busy. While she was blaming her own body for failing them. Donovan walked to his nightstand and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Precious without ceremony, without gentleness. Divorce papers. Already prepared. Already reviewed by his team of lawyers. "Sign them," he said. "My lawyers will be in touch about the details." Precious finally found her voice. "Donovan, we can work through this. We can. There's nothing to work through. I'm going to be a father, Precious. Just not with you." She looked at the papers with shaking hands. The prenup she'd signed when she was 25 and stupidly in love came flooding back to her. She'd signed it without really reading it, trusting him, believing in forever. Now she understood what it meant. In the event of divorce she got nothing. No alimony. No share of his assets. Nothing. She'd given up her career to support his. She'd given up friendships, hobbies, her own dreams, to be the perfect wife. And now she was being erased like she'd never existed. But the real destruction hadn't even started yet. Within 48 hours everyone knew. Donovan made sure of that. He controlled the narrative perfectly. He was the heartbroken husband who'd tried everything to make it work with his infertile wife. Sienna was the childhood friend who'd been there to comfort him. An accident that turned into something more. And Precious? She was the failure. The broken one. The woman who couldn't do the one thing women were supposed to do. Her phone rang 3 days after she moved out. It was her father. Precious had thought, maybe foolishly, that her family would stand by her. That blood would mean something. That her pain would matter more than Donovan's money. He was wrong again. "Precious." Her father's voice was stern, disappointed. "We need to talk about this situation." Situation. Her voice was hollow. "Dad, he cheated on me. He got another woman pregnant while we were married." "You had one job," her father said, and Precious felt something crack inside her chest. "One job. Give him an heir. Continue the legacy. And you couldn't do it. I tried. For 5 years I tried everything. Not hard enough, apparently. Do you know what this is doing to our family's reputation? Donovan has invested millions into our businesses. He's connected us to people we could never have reached on our own. And now you've embarrassed him, embarrassed us. I embarrassed him? Precious couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're making this difficult for everyone. Sign the papers. Move on quietly. Let him have his happiness. That's the least you can do after failing him so completely. The line went dead. Precious called her mother next. Surely her mother would understand. Surely the woman who gave birth to her would offer some comfort, some support, some love. Her mother answered on the 5th ring. Mom, did you talk to Dad? Did he tell you what he said to me? Silence. Mom. I don't know what you expect me to say, Precious. Her mother's voice was quiet, defeated. Your father's right. This is humiliating for all of us. I'm your daughter. And Donovan is our future. Was our future. Until you ruined it. Precious tried one more time to reach her. He cheated on me. He threw me away. Don't I deserve better than this? Her mother sighed, long and tired. Deserving and getting are two different things. You're 32 years old, Precious. You're not a child anymore. You made your bed when you couldn't give him what he needed. Now you have to lie in it. When Precious went to her parents' house to pick up some belongings she'd stored there, her mother wouldn't even look at her. Just pointed to the boxes by the door, already packed, already waiting to be removed. Precious's friends disappeared too. Most of them were Donovan's friends first, or friends she'd made through his social circle. The few who had been truly hers got quiet, stopped responding to texts, made excuses about being busy. He understood. In their world, Donovan was power. Donovan was money. Donovan was the future. And she was nothing. 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Precious sat in a tiny studio apartment across town. The kind of place she never imagined she'd live in. The walls were thin. She could hear her neighbors arguing. The refrigerator hummed too loud. The shower barely had hot water. Around her were scattered empty pregnancy test boxes. Even after everything, some part of her had kept hoping. Kept thinking maybe it would finally happen now that the pressure was off. Maybe her body had just been stressed. But month after month the tests came back negative. Because the problem had never been stress. The problem had never been Precious at all. She didn't know that yet. All she knew, sitting on the floor of that tiny apartment at 2 a.m, was that she had lost everything. Her husband. Her home. Her family. Her identity. Every single thing she'd built her life around was gone. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Hollow eyes. Gaunt cheeks. Hair that hadn't been properly washed in days. She whispered to her reflection, if I can't be their daughter, their wife, their anything, then who am I? The mirror had no answer. Have you ever been blamed for something that wasn't your fault? Have you ever lost everything because of a lie you didn't even know was being told about you? Drop a comment below and let me know, because what happens next is going to change everything. And if you want to see how this story ends, how Precious goes from broken to unstoppable, hit that subscribe button right now. Because trust me, you don't want to miss what she does next. Rock Bottom has a funny way of clarifying things. When you've lost everything, when there's nothing left to protect and no one left to impress, you finally get to ask yourself the most important question. Who do I want to be? For Precious, the answer came at 4 a.m, staring at her bank account. She had $8,347 to her name. Everything she'd managed to save from odd jobs, from selling her jewelry, from scraping together whatever she could. It wasn't much. But it was enough to disappear. She didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell. Instead, she bought a one-way ticket to Vancouver, Canada. She'd visited once years ago, before Donovan, before everything. She remembered how the city felt like it existed in its own world. Mountains meeting ocean. Rain that washed everything clean. A place where nobody knew her name or her story or her shame. When Precious landed in Vancouver, she had 2 suitcases and a plan to simply survive. Nothing more ambitious than that. Just survive. She found a basement apartment in East Vancouver. 400 square feet. The ceiling leaked when it rained, which in Vancouver meant it leaked almost every day. But it was hers. And more importantly, it was 3,000 miles away from everyone who'd decided she wasn't enough. Surviving, it turned out, required money. And money required work. Lots of it. Precious took a job as a barista at a coffee shop near Main Street. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning, make lattes for software developers and artists and students, smile through her exhaustion and collect her tips in a jar by the register. The owner, an older Vietnamese woman named Lon, didn't ask questions. She just showed Precious how to work the espresso machine and told her the bathroom code. But one job wasn't enough. Rent was due. Food cost money. Existing cost money. So Precious took a second job doing bookkeeping for a small accounting firm. She'd finish her shift at the coffee shop at 2, go home and sleep for exactly 90 minutes, then work from 6 to midnight reconciling spreadsheets and organizing receipts for businesses she'd never heard of. Her eyes would burn from staring at numbers. Her back would ache from sitting in a cheap desk chair. But the checks cleared and that was all that mattered. Weekends she catered events. Weddings mostly, which was its own special kind of torture. She'd serve champagne to happy couples, watch first dances, listen to speeches about forever and feel absolutely nothing. She'd gone numb somewhere along the way. And honestly, numb felt safer than feeling. 6 weeks into her new life, Precious saw a flyer at the coffee shop. Free grief counseling at the community center. Wednesdays at 7. She almost didn't go. What would she even say? That she was grieving a marriage that had been a lie? That she was mourning a family who'd chosen money over her? That she was sad about a version of herself that never actually existed? But on a particularly gray Wednesday, after a particularly difficult shift where a customer screamed at her for putting oat milk instead of almond milk in his latte, Precious found herself walking into that community center. The room was small. Folding chairs arranged in a circle. Maybe 15 people scattered around. All of them looking just as uncomfortable as she felt. The counselor, a kind-faced woman named Ruth, smiled warmly. "Welcome. We're glad you're here. We're just going around sharing our names and if you're comfortable, what brought you here today?" Precious listened to stories of loss. A woman whose husband died of cancer. A man whose sister was killed by a drunk driver. A teenager whose best friend committed suicide. Real loss. The kind that made Precious feel guilty for even being there. When it got to her, she almost left. But then she said quietly, "I'm Precious. And I'm grieving the life I thought I'd have." Ruth nodded. "That's a real loss. Thank you for sharing." Across the circle, a man looked up. He'd been quiet the whole session, hands folded in his lap, eyes distant. He was maybe mid-40s with graying hair at his temples and the kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. Next to him sat a girl maybe 9 years old with dark curls and her father's same gray eyes. She was coloring aggressively in a notebook, her jaw set in determination. When it was his turn, the man spoke softly. "I'm Elliot Vaughn. This is my daughter, Thea. We lost my wife, Thea's mother, about a year ago. And we're trying to figure out how to be a family when it feels like the center is missing." Thea didn't look up from her coloring. Precious felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction, not yet. Just recognition. Here was someone else who understood that grief wasn't always about death. Sometimes it was about absence. Sometimes it was about learning to be a person again when the identity you built has been demolished. After the session, Precious was putting on her coat when Elliot approached. "Hi," he said, offering a small smile. "I just wanted to say what you shared resonated. About grieving the life you thought you'd have. I think that's something people don't talk about enough." Precious looked at him properly for the first time. There was kindness in his face. But also respect. He wasn't looking at her like she was broken. He was looking at her like she was human. "Thank you," she said. "And I'm sorry about your wife." "I'm sorry about your life," he replied, and somehow it didn't sound patronizing. Sounded genuine. Thea tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad, I'm hungry." "Right, yes." Elliot looked back at Precious. "We usually grab pizza after this. There's a place down the street. Would you want to join us?" "No pressure. Just, I think Thea's tired of only talking to me." Thea rolled her eyes but didn't disagree. Precious should have said no. She should have gone home, crawled into bed, prepared for her 4:50 alarm. But something about the invitation felt safe. Casual. Human. "Sure," she said. "I could eat." That pizza dinner turned into another one the next week. And then coffee became a regular thing. Elliot would stop by the shop where Precious worked, order a black coffee, and they'd talk during her breaks. About nothing important. About books and Vancouver weather and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Precious learned that Elliot was a doctor, a specialist in medical technology. He'd left clinical practice after his wife died to start a company developing diagnostic tools. He was drowning in venture capital meetings and prototype testing, trying to build something meaningful while also raising a 9-year-old alone. Thea was brilliant and angry and funny. She was struggling in school not because she wasn't smart, but because she was furious at the world for taking her mother. She liked Precious because Precious didn't try too hard. Didn't ask invasive questions. Just treated her like a person who happened to be going through something hard. Months passed. The friendship deepened slowly, organically. Elliot never pushed. Never asked about her past beyond what she volunteered. Never looked at her like she was a project to fix or a wound to heal. Sometimes the right person appears when you've stopped performing for the wrong audience. Precious hadn't realized how much of her old life had been a performance. The perfect wife. The accommodating daughter. The woman who made herself smaller so everyone else could be bigger. With Elliot and Thea she didn't have to perform. He could just exist. 6 months after moving to Vancouver, Precious was pulling a double shift. Barista in the morning, bookkeeping in the evening, catering that night. She'd been feeling off all week. Dizzy. Nauseous. Exhausted in a way that felt deeper than just lack of sleep. She was making a cappuccino when the room started spinning. She grabbed the counter to steady herself, but her legs gave out. The last thing she heard was Lon shouting her name. She woke up in the emergency room. Bright lights. Beeping machines. A nurse checking her vitals. "You're awake," the nurse said, smiling. "You gave your boss quite a scare. How are you feeling?" "Tired," Precious admitted. "What happened?" "You fainted. Dehydration, exhaustion, low blood sugar." "When's the last time you had a proper meal and a full night's sleep?" Precious couldn't remember. "We ran some tests just to make sure everything's okay," the nurse continued. "The doctor will be in shortly to discuss the results." 20 minutes later a doctor entered. Young, professional, holding a tablet. "Miss Precious," he said, sitting down. "So, we found the reason for your fainting episode." Precious braced herself. Anemia maybe. Or something worse. Something that would cost money she didn't have. "You're pregnant," the doctor said. "About 9 weeks along. Actually it's twins. Congratulations." The room went silent. The machines kept beeping but Precious couldn't hear them. Couldn't hear anything over the rushing in her ears. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The tests are very clear. You're carrying twins." "No, you don't understand. I can't get pregnant. I've been trying for years. I'm infertile." The doctor looked at her chart, confused. "Do you have a diagnosis of infertility? Any medical records I should review?" Precious realized she didn't. All those years, all those treatments, it had been Donovan pushing for them. Donovan talking to the doctors. Donovan managing the narrative. She'd just been told she was the problem and she'd believed it. "Can I see my medical records?" Precious asked, her voice shaking. "Everything you have on file." The doctor hesitated but nodded. He pulled up her chart, everything that had been transferred from her previous healthcare providers. And there was, buried in notes from 3 years ago, a fertility specialist's assessment. Precious's test had all come back normal. Healthy ovarian reserve. Regular cycles. No issues detected. The notes recommended testing the male partner. There was no record of Donovan ever being tested. The problem had never been her. For 5 years she'd been told her body was broken. For 5 years she'd believed she was defective. For 5 years she'd carried the shame and guilt and grief of not being able to give her husband what he wanted. And it had all been a lie. But that still didn't explain how she was pregnant now. She hadn't been with anyone. She'd been working 3 jobs and barely surviving and definitely not dating or having any kind of... And then she remembered. The IVF. Years ago, in the early days of their marriage when Donovan still looked at her with something like love, they'd done 1 round of IVF. Just in case, the doctor had said. To have options. They'd created embryos. 6 of them. Precious had been told they were stored at the fertility clinic. In the chaos of the divorce, with everything happening so fast and so brutally, she'd completely forgotten about them. Forgotten to ask what happened to those embryos. Forgotten they existed. Until 8 months ago, right before she left for Vancouver, she'd gotten an email. A generic message from the clinic about embryo storage fees. In her grief-stricken, desperate state, she'd done something impulsive. something she barely remembered doing. She'd authorized the clinic to attempt implantation. One last try. One final middle finger to the universe that had taken everything from her. And then she'd left the country and forgotten all about it. But her body hadn't forgotten. Precious sat in that hospital bed, staring at the ultrasound image the doctor handed her. 2 tiny shadows. 2 heartbeats. 2 lives growing inside her. The babies Donovan had said she could never give him. The legacy he'd left her for. The whole reason her life had been destroyed. They were here. They'd been possible all along. Precious started crying. Not soft tears. Huge, body-shaking sobs. The nurse rushed over, concerned, but Precious waved her off. She wasn't crying from sadness. She was crying from rage. Pure white-hot rage. She could have had children all along. Her body had never been the problem. Donovan had let her believe she was broken. Had let her go through invasive treatments and hormones and shame. Had destroyed her when the real issue was him. And now she was carrying his children. The legacy he'd wanted so badly. The heirs he'd thrown her away for. And he would never know. Precious left the hospital 3 hours later with prenatal vitamins, a stack of pamphlets about twin pregnancies, and a follow-up appointment scheduled for next week. She also left with something she hadn't felt in months: purpose. She called Elliot from the hospital parking lot. Told him what happened. Expected shock, maybe judgment, maybe distance. Instead he said, "Oi, what do you need?" That was it. No questions about the father. No moral commentary. Just, "What do you need?" "I need to figure out how to do this," Precious said. "I can't work 3 jobs while pregnant with twins. I can barely afford this apartment. I don't know how I'm going to." "We'll figure it out," Elliot said firmly. "You're not doing this alone." The pregnancy was brutal. Twins meant double the nausea, double the exhaustion, double the risk. Precious had to quit 2 of her jobs. Elliot hired her to do bookkeeping and administrative work for his startup. Work she could do from home on her own schedule. More than that, he became her family. He drove her to appointments. Thea helped her pick out baby clothes. When Precious couldn't afford a proper crib, 2 arrived at her apartment with a note. "Every baby deserves a safe place to sleep. E.N.T." 7 months later, Precious gave birth to Caspian and Celeste. A boy and a girl. Perfect and healthy in hers. The nurse asked if she wanted to call the father. Precious said no. There was no father. Not in any way that mattered. Elliot was in the waiting room, though. Thea. With flowers and balloons and tears in his eyes when he first held Caspian. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "You're amazing." During those long nights of feeding and diaper changes and wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake, Precious started thinking about her journey. About all the women like her who'd been told their bodies were broken. Who'd been blamed and shamed and discarded. He started researching. Started learning everything she could about fertility, about tracking cycles, about the technology that existed and the gaps that remained. One night, feeding Celeste at 2 in the morning, she had an idea. She called Elliot the next day. "What if we built something? An app that uses AI to track fertility, not just for getting pregnant but for understanding your body. Something that puts the power back in women's hands." Elliot was quiet for a moment. Then, "Tell me more." For the next 6 months while raising twins, Precious threw herself into development. She used her bookkeeping skills to manage finances. Her years of failed fertility treatments gave her unique insight. And Elliot's medical technology expertise gave them credibility. They called it Luminance Health. The app launched small. Just a few hundred users. But word spread fast. Women who'd been dismissed by doctors, who'd been told their symptoms were in their heads, who'd been blamed for their bodies not cooperating, they found Luminance. The app used artificial intelligence to identify patterns. To predict cycles with unprecedented accuracy. To flag potential health issues before they became serious. It wasn't just about getting pregnant. It was about understanding your own body in a way medicine had failed to provide. 6 months after launch, they had 50,000 users. A year later, 500,000. Venture capitalists started calling. Health insurance companies wanted to partner. Major hospitals wanted to integrate the technology. 2 years after Precious had arrived in Vancouver with $8,000 and a broken heart, Luminance Health was valued at $200 million. Precious was the founder and CEO. Her face was on magazine covers. Tech publications called her a visionary. She was invited to speak at conferences, to advise health organizations, to consult with governments. The twins were 2 years old. Caspian was obsessed with trucks. Celeste loved books. They knew Elliot as Uncle Elliot, and Thea as their favorite person in the world. Precious lived in a house now. Nothing like the mansion she'd lost, but something better. Something she'd built herself. The walls were filled with pictures of her children. Her office overlooked the water. Every morning she'd have coffee on her deck and watch the sun rise over the mountains. She was happy. Actually genuinely happy. And then one Tuesday afternoon, sitting in her office reviewing quarterly reports, Precious received an email. An invitation. To Donovan and Sienna's engagement party. They'd been together for 3 years but had never actually married. Precious had heard through the grapevine that their relationship was rocky. That the child Sienna had been pregnant with, the one that had destroyed Precious's marriage, wasn't even Donovan's. That they'd stayed together anyway, saving face, pretending everything was perfect. The invitation was cruel. Deliberately sent to an old email address they must have thought was dead. Sienna had included a personal note. Wish you could see what a real family looks like. Precious stared at that invitation for a long time. She could delete it. Could ignore it. Could continue building her beautiful, peaceful life and never look back. But something in her chest burned. Not for revenge exactly. But for closure. For the ability to look the people who'd destroyed her in the eye and show them exactly who she'd become. She picked up her phone and called Elliot. I need to tell you something, she said. About the twins' father. Would you go back to prove them wrong or would you just move on? Because what Precious is about to do is going to change everything and you need to see what happens next. Hit that subscribe button right now because the confrontation that's coming is absolutely explosive, and you're not going to want to miss a single second of it. The invitation sat on Precious's desk for 3 days before she opened it. Thick cardstock. Expensive paper. The kind of invitation that screamed money and status and look at us, we're so perfect. She knew what it was the moment it arrived. Her assistant had forwarded it from an old email account, one Precious hadn't checked in years. The email address from her old life. The one attached to the woman who used to organize charity galas and smile through lunch dates with women who didn't actually like her. When Precious finally opened the envelope, her hands were steady. She'd built a $200 million company. She'd given birth to twins. She'd survived things that should have destroyed her. A piece of paper couldn't hurt her anymore. The invitation was elegant. Gold lettering on cream paper. Donovan Hart and Sienna Clark request the honor of your presence at their engagement celebration. Engagement. Not wedding. After 3 years together they still hadn't actually gotten married. Interesting. But it was the handwritten note tucked inside that made Precious's jaw tighten. In Sienna's looping, pretentious handwriting. Precious, I know we haven't spoken in years, but I wanted to personally invite you to celebrate our happiness. I wish you could see what a real family looks like. Maybe it would give you hope that someday you'll find what we have. A real family. Precious read those words 3 times. Let them sink in. Let the intended cruelty of them wash over her. And then she laughed. Not a bitter laugh. A genuine, from-the-belly laugh that made her assistant peek into the office with concern. You okay, boss? Never better, Precious said, still smiling. Can you do me a favor? Look up everything you can find on Donovan Hart and Sienna Clark. Social media, news articles, gossip columns. Everything. Her assistant nodded and disappeared. An hour later she returned with a folder. This is interesting, she said, laying out printouts. So, they've been together for 3 years but only just now getting engaged. There's a kid, looks like he's about 3 years old. But here's the thing, there was a leak about 6 months ago. Someone posted on a gossip forum that the kid isn't actually Donovan's. DNA test results somehow got out. It caused a huge scandal in their social circle. Precious scanned the documents. Screenshots of deleted social media posts. Blind items from society blogs. Whispers and rumors that painted a picture of a relationship held together by pride and desperation rather than love. Sienna's child, the one she'd been pregnant with when she destroyed Precious's marriage, wasn't even Donovan's. Anything else? Precious asked. His company's struggling. Stock prices are down 30% from 2 years ago. There's talk of a buyout but nothing's finalized. And this is just gossip, but multiple sources say they fight constantly. The engagement party seems like a PR move more than anything. Precious sat back in her chair. So Donovan had blown up their marriage for a child that wasn't even his. He'd called her defective, thrown her away, destroyed her relationship with her family, all for a lie. And now he was throwing a party to celebrate that lie. The old Precious would have thrown the invitation away. Would have taken the high road. Would have convinced herself that moving on meant never looking back. But this Precious, the one who'd built herself from rubble, the one who'd learned that sometimes closure requires confrontation, she made a different choice. She was going back. That evening, Precious sat in her living room with Elliot. The twins were asleep upstairs. Caspian had fought bedtime as usual. Celeste had demanded 3 different stories. Normal, beautiful chaos. I got an invitation today, Precious said, handing Elliot the card. He read it, his expression darkening. This is cruel. It is, Precious agreed. And I'm going. Elliot looked up sharply. Are you sure that's a good idea? Probably not, Precious admitted. But I need to do this, Elliot. I need to look them in the eye and show them who I became after they threw me away. Then I'm coming with you, Elliot said immediately. You're not facing them alone. Precious felt her chest tighten with gratitude. Over the past 3 years, Elliot had become her best friend. Her business partner. The person who showed up without being asked. The person who saw her on her worst days and never flinched. But this was something she needed to do herself. No, she said gently. I need to do this alone. Well, not alone. She glanced toward the stairs where her children slept. I'm bringing Caspian and Celeste. Elliot frowned. Precious, are you sure? They're 4 years old. That's a lot for them too. They need to see where I came from, Precious interrupted. So they understand why we'll never go back. Elliot studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Hey. But I want you to call me after. And if you need me to come get you any time, I'm 20 minutes away. Deal. 3 weeks later, Precious stood in front of her old family mansion. The place she'd once called home. The place where she'd hosted dinner parties and pretended to be happy and slowly lost herself trying to be enough. It looked exactly the same. Imposing. Beautiful. Caspian squeezed her right hand. Mama, is this where you used to live? A long time ago, baby, Precious said. Before I knew better. Celeste looked up at her with those serious gray eyes. It's big. It is, Precious agreed. But big doesn't always mean good. Through the windows she could see the party. Chandeliers glittering. People in expensive clothes holding champagne glasses. Laughter and music floating out into the cool evening air. She'd bought a new dress for tonight. Not designer, nothing too flashy. Just a beautifully cut navy dress that made her feel powerful. Her hair was styled simply. Her makeup minimal. She didn't need armor anymore. Her success was armor enough. Ready? She asked her children. Ready, they chorused. Precious walked up the front steps, her children's hands in hers, and pushed open the door. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Every head in the room turned toward the entrance. For a moment there was absolute silence. And then the whispers started. Is that Precious? Oh my God, it is. She has children? Who's the father? I thought she couldn't get pregnant. Look at her, she looks amazing. Precious stood in the doorway letting them look. Letting them see the woman they'd written off. The woman they'd decided wasn't worth their time or loyalty or basic human decency. She saw her mother first. Margaret was standing near the piano, wine glass in hand, talking to someone Precious didn't recognize. When their eyes met, Margaret's face went pale. She set down her glass and started walking over, arms outstretched. Precious, sweetheart, I can't believe you came. It's been so long, I've missed you so much. Precious took a step back. Caspian and Celeste pressed closer to her sides. Don't, Precious said quietly. Firmly. Don't pretend we're something we're not. Margaret stopped, hurt flashing across her face. But you're my daughter. These are my grandchildren. Precious finished. You lost that privilege 3 years ago when you chose his money over your own child. People were definitely listening now. The whispers had stopped. Everyone was openly staring. Margaret's face flushed. Precious, please, not here. Can we talk privately? No, Precious said. I'm not here for reconciliation. I'm here to close a chapter. Precious. The voice came from across the room. Familiar. The voice that used to tell her he loved her. The voice that had called her defective. Donovan. He looked older. Tired. His hair had more gray. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was still handsome, still carried himself with that CEO confidence, but something about him looked diminished. Behind him, clinging to his arm, was Sienna. She'd gained weight, Precious noticed. Not in a bad way, just in the way that happens when stress and unhappiness settle into your body. Her smile was frozen. Her eyes were panicked. Donovan walked toward Precious slowly, like approaching a wild animal. His eyes kept darting to the twins. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "Surprise," Precious replied evenly. He stopped a few feet away. Close enough that she could smell his cologne. The same one he'd always worn. It used to make her feel safe. Now it just smelled like expensive lies. "Whose children are those?" he asked. His voice was carefully controlled, but Precious could hear the undercurrent. Confusion. Curiosity. Maybe even jealousy. Precious smiled. Not warmly. Just a small curve of her lips. "Mine," she said simply. "Obviously, but who's the father? Does it matter?" Donovan's jaw clenched. "Yes. It matters. You told me you couldn't get pregnant. We tried for 5 years. You couldn't." "Couldn't?" Precious interrupted. "Or you couldn't?" The color drained from Donovan's face. Sienna's grip on his arm tightened. "Donovan, let's not do this here." "Let's." "No," Precious said, looking directly at Sienna. "Let's absolutely do this here. You wanted me to see what a real family looks like, remember? That was in your note. So let's all look." The room was dead silent now. 60 people holding their breath, sensing blood in the water. Donovan's voice dropped. "Can we talk? Privately? In my study?" Precious considered refusing. But part of her wanted this conversation without an audience. Wanted to watch his face when she told him the truth. "Fine," she said. She looked down at her children. "Caspian, Celeste, you stay here with." She glanced around and spotted Elliot's sister, who'd flown in for support and was standing near the door. "With Aunt Rachel, okay? Mama will be right back." "Okay, Mama," they said in unison. Precious followed Donovan through the mansion. Past the dining room where they'd hosted 30 dinner parties. Past the library where she used to read while he worked. Down the hall to his study. The room smelled like leather and whiskey. Nothing had changed. Same mahogany desk. Same wall of books he'd never read. Same pretentious artwork that cost more than most people's cars. Donovan closed the door. Turned to face her. "Who is he?" he asked immediately. "Who's the father? Why do you care?" "Because you're standing in my house with 2 children you supposedly couldn't have, and I deserve to know." "You deserve." Precious laughed. Actually laughed. "You deserve nothing from me, Donovan." His face hardened. "Fine. Don't tell me. But you need to leave. This is my engagement party and having you here is." "You are," Precious said quietly. Donovan froze. "What?" "You're the father." The silence that followed was absolute. Precious watched the emotions cycle through Donovan's face. Confusion. Disbelief. Hope. Fear. "That's impossible," he finally said. "We tried for 5 years. The doctors said." "The doctors said nothing was wrong with me," Precious interrupted. "Did you ever actually follow up on your own test results, Donovan? Or did you just assume that if we couldn't get pregnant it had to be my fault?" His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "The clinic would have told me if." "Would they?" Precious pulled a folder from her purse. She'd brought copies. Had planned this moment. She laid medical records on his desk. "These are your fertility test results from 4 years ago. Severe sperm motility issues. Low count. The doctor recommended further testing and possible treatment." Donovan stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "You never went back," Precious continued. "You never followed up. You just decided it was easier to blame me. But if you couldn't, how are they mine? Remember the IVF we did? Early in our marriage? When you still pretended to love me?" Precious's voice was sharp now, cutting. "We created 6 embryos. They were stored at the clinic. When you threw me away, when everyone abandoned me, I left the country. But before I did, I authorized one final implantation. One last middle finger to the universe. And it worked. Donovan breathed. It worked, Precious confirmed. The embryos we created when you were younger, when your fertility issues weren't as severe, they were viable. The problem was never me, Donovan. It was you. And time. And your refusal to admit you could be the broken one. Donovan sank into his desk chair. His hands were shaking. I have children, he whispered. No, Precious said firmly. I have children. You have DNA. That's all. Precious, if I'd known, if I'd realized. You would have what? She demanded. Not cheated on me with my friend? Not called me defective? Not let my family disown me? Not taken everything from me and left me with nothing? I'm sorry, he said, and tears were actually running down his face. God, Precious, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. Yes, Precious agreed. You were. But we can fix this, Donovan said, standing up suddenly. We can co-parent. I can support them. I can be their father. We can. Co-parent. Precious's voice was ice. You want to co-parent children you didn't know existed until 10 minutes ago? Children you don't know anything about? Children who have a full, happy life without you. They're my children. They're not, Precious said. Biology doesn't make you a parent, Donovan. Love does. Sacrifice does. Showing up does. You've done none of that. Because I didn't know. And whose fault is that? Precious shot back. You destroyed our marriage. You destroyed me. You made your choice. These are the consequences. Donovan's face crumbled. Please. Please, Precious. Let me be part of their lives. Let me make this right. Make what right? The fact that you built your life on a lie? The fact that Sienna's child isn't even yours? Donovan flinched. So he did know. Yeah, Precious continued. I heard about that. DNA test results leaked, didn't they? You've been raising a child that isn't yours, living with a woman you don't love, pretending you have the perfect family you threw me away to get. How's that working out for you? Donovan couldn't finish the sentence. Meanwhile, Precious said, her voice softening not with sympathy but with finality, I built something real. I have a company worth $200 million. I have children who are healthy and happy and loved. I have a life I actually want to wake up to. I became everything you said I couldn't be. She walked toward the door, then paused. Turn back. You could have had all of this, Donovan. The children. The partnership. The real family. But you were too proud to admit you might be the problem. Too selfish to see what was right in front of you. So you destroyed it. And you've been living in the ruins ever since. Donovan reached for her. Actually reached for her like he had any right to touch her. Precious, please. We can start over. I'll leave Sienna. Precious stepped back. I don't fix broken things anymore, Donovan. I build new ones. And you're not worth the materials. She opened the door and walked out, leaving him standing in his study, surrounded by his expensive things and his expensive lies, more alone than he'd ever been. Should she have told him the truth about the twins? Should she have kept that secret forever? Drop a comment and let me know, because this story is about to reach its explosive conclusion, and you need to see what happens when Precious faces everyone who betrayed her. Hit that subscribe button right now, because the final confrontation is going to leave you speechless. When Precious walked back into that party, every eye was on her. They'd all been waiting, whispering, speculating about what was being said behind that closed study door. She could see it in their faces. The hunger for drama. The desperate need to know what scandal was unfolding. These people had once been her social circle. Had smiled at her over brunch and stabbed her in the back before dessert. Now they were watching her like she was entertainment. Precious walked to the center of the room. Caspian and Celeste were still with Rachel, coloring in a corner, blissfully unaware of the adult chaos around them. Good. Let them stay innocent a little longer. The room fell silent. Waiting. Precious could expose everything right now. Could tell them all about Donovan's fertility issues. About Sienna's child not being his. About the medical lies and the cruelty and the absolute destruction they'd caused. She could burn their reputations to the ground. The old Precious would have wanted that. Would have craved that revenge. But this Precious had learned something important. She didn't need to destroy them. They'd already destroyed themselves. I want to thank you all for the warm welcome, Precious said, her voice carrying across the room. Calm. Measured. Powerful. I know my presence here tonight is unexpected. Someone coughed uncomfortably. Sienna was frozen near the champagne table, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. I came back tonight for one reason, Precious continued. To show my children where I came from. So they'll know where never to return. A few people gasped. Most just stared. Precious's gaze found her parents. Her father looked older. Grayer. Her mother's hands were clutched around her wine glass so tightly Precious thought it might shatter. Mom, Dad, Precious said, walking toward them. They stood together near the fireplace, looking like they wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. It's been 3 years. You look well. Her father cleared his throat. Precious, he stumbled over his words. We've missed you. We made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. And we'd like the chance to. To what? Precious asked. To apologize. To make amends. To meet your grandchildren. Yes, her mother breathed. Yes, all of that. Precious studied them. These people who'd raised her. Who taught her to ride a bike and helped her with homework and told her they'd always be there for her. Until it was inconvenient. You invested in a man who threw away your daughter, Precious said quietly. That's a bad portfolio decision. Her father flinched. We know. We realize that now. Donovan's company is failing. The stock is nearly worthless. We've lost almost everything we put into his ventures. I know, Precious said. Her father blinked. You know. I know everything about Donovan's company. I've been watching it circle the drain for the past year. Precious smiled. Not kindly. Because I'm the lead investor in his biggest competitor. We launch next month. We're going to bury what's left of his market share. The gasps that rippled through the room were audible. People pulled out phones. Started Googling. Started connecting dots. Her father's face went pale. You're in competition with Donovan? Not competition, Precious corrected. Annihilation. His company is obsolete. He's been running on fumes and investor confidence for 2 years. When we launch, that confidence disappears. He knows it. I know it. And now you all know it. You did this on purpose, her mother whispered. You targeted him. No, Precious said. I built something better. That's not targeting. That's capitalism. If his company can't compete, that's not my problem. That's his. A voice cut through the stunned silence. Bitter. Desperate. You're pathetic, Sienna said, stepping forward. She'd had too much champagne. Her words were slightly slurred, her perfect composure cracking. You show up here with your mystery children and your fake success story, acting like you're better than all of us. But we all know the truth. Do tell, Precious said, turning to face her. What truth is that? You're bitter, Sienna spat. You're a bitter, vindictive woman who can't let go of the past. Donovan moved on. I moved on. Everyone moved on. But here you are, clinging to old wounds, trying to make us feel guilty for finding happiness. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Precious looked at Sienna. Really looked at her. This woman who'd been her friend. Who'd sat in her kitchen and drunk her wine and planned her wedding. Who'd slept with her husband and then sent her an invitation to celebrate the family she'd stolen. And Precious felt nothing. No anger. No hate. Not even satisfaction. Just a distant pity for how small Sienna's life had become. I'm not bitter, Precious said softly. I'm just expensive now. And you can't afford me. Before Sienna could respond, the front door opened. Elliot walked in. He was supposed to be at home. Precious had told him she needed to do this alone. But here he was, in a perfectly tailored suit, scanning the room until his eyes found hers. He walked directly to her. Didn't acknowledge anyone else. Just came to her side and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. The gesture was protective. Supportive. Intimate. The room erupted in whispers again. Who is that? Is that the father? Oh my God, look at him. They look perfect together. Donovan emerged from his study. His eyes were red. His composure shattered. He took one look at Elliot standing beside Precious and something in him broke completely. Who is this? Donovan demanded, his voice too loud. Too desperate. Precious looked at Elliot. He smiled at her. A small, private smile that said, I'm here and you're not alone and I've got your back. She looked back at Donovan. This is Elliot Vaughn, Precious said. My partner. In every way that matters. The phrasing was deliberate. Ambiguous enough to let people draw their own conclusions. Specific enough that Donovan would understand she'd built a life that had nothing to do with him. Elliot extended his hand toward Donovan. Professional. Polite. Nice to meet you. Donovan didn't shake it. Just stared at Elliot like he was trying to solve an equation. Then back at Precious. Then at the twins still coloring in the corner. This is who you chose. Donovan's voice cracked. Him. I didn't choose him over you, Precious said. I chose myself. Elliot just happened to be smart enough to recognize what you couldn't see. That I was never the problem. Elliot's hand squeezed her shoulder gently. A silent reminder that it was time to go. They'd said what needed saying. Staying longer would just be cruel. And Precious wasn't cruel. Not anymore. Caspian, Celeste, Precious called. Come on, babies. Time to go home. The twins jumped up, grabbed their coloring books and ran to her. Caspian took her hand. Celeste took Elliot's. They looked like a family. Because they were one. Precious walked toward the exit. Past the people who'd abandoned her. Past the life she used to want. Past all of it. Her mother suddenly moved. Stepped directly into Precious's path, blocking the doorway. Wait, Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. Please wait. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Your father was wrong. We chose money over you and that was unforgivable. But please give us another chance. Let me know my grandchildren. Let me make this right. Precious stopped. Looked at her mother. This woman who'd carried her for 9 months. Who'd kissed scraped knees and braided her hair and told her she could be anything. Who'd then told her she was worthless because she couldn't give a man an heir. They have a grandmother, Precious said quietly. Elliot's mother. Fisha. She was there when I gave birth. She was there for their first steps. Their first words. Every birthday. Every milestone. She's been there for everything you chose to miss. But these are my blood, Margaret whispered desperately. They're my grandchildren. That has to count for something. Precious felt Caspian squeeze her hand tighter. Felt Celeste press against her leg. Her children. Her responsibility to protect. Blood is the minimum requirement for family, Precious said. Love is what makes it real. And you don't get to love them now just because it's convenient. Just because you finally realized what you lost. I made a mistake, Margaret sobbed. One mistake. Don't punish me forever. It wasn't one mistake, Precious said. It was a choice. You chose every day for 3 years not to reach out. Not to apologize. Not to fight for your daughter. You chose his money over my humanity. That wasn't a mistake. That was a decision. And decisions have consequences. She gently moved around her mother. Didn't push. Didn't shove. Just walked past. Behind her she heard her mother collapse into her father's arms, crying. Precious kept walking. At the door she paused. Turned back one final time. Donovan was standing in the center of the room. Broken. Devastated. Surrounded by people but completely alone. Sienna was beside him, clinging to his arm, but there was no comfort there. Just 2 people trapped in a lie they'd built together. Their eyes met across the room. Precious had imagined this moment so many times. Imagined what she'd say to him if she ever got the chance. Imagined the perfect cutting remark. The devastating final blow. But looking at him now, she realized she didn't need to say anything devastating. The truth was devastating enough. I don't hate you anymore, Donovan, Precious said. Her voice was soft but carried in the silent room. I pity you. You had everything. A wife who loved you. A chance at a real family. A partner who would have built an empire with you instead of in spite of you. And you traded all of it for nothing. He looked at Sienna. Both of you did. Then Precious looked around the room. At all the people who'd turned their backs on her. Who'd chosen status over loyalty. Who'd believed the lies because the lies were more convenient than the truth. Thank you all for teaching me the most important lesson I've ever learned, she said. That rock bottom is the solid foundation on which I built my life. Without all of you pushing me there, I never would have discovered how strong I actually am. With that, Precious walked out. Elliot beside her. Caspian and Celeste skipping ahead, already asking if they could get ice cream on the way home. The door closed behind them. Inside the mansion the party was over. Oh, people would stay. Would finish their champagne. Would gossip about what they'd just witnessed. But the celebration was dead. The illusion was shattered. Donovan stood in the center of the room, watching through the window as Precious strapped her children into car seats. As Elliot opened her door for her. As they drove away into a future he wasn't part of. Sienna tried to take his hand. He pulled away. Margaret was still crying, being consoled by people who didn't really care. And all of them, everyone in that room, suddenly understood what they'd lost when they threw Precious away. She'd given them a chance to be part of something extraordinary. To support someone remarkable. To love someone unconditionally. And they'd chosen money, status, convenience. Now that remarkable woman was gone. And she was never coming back. In the car, Caspian looked up at his mother. "Mama, are those people your family?" Precious glanced at Elliot. He smiled at her. She looked in the rearview mirror at her beautiful children. "No, baby," she said. "You are my family. You and Celeste and Uncle Elliot and Aunt Thea and Grandma Patricia. Those people back there? They're just strangers who used to know a different version of me." "I like this version of you," Celeste said seriously. "Me too, baby," Precious laughed. "Me too." Elliot reached over and took her hand. Squeezed it gently. And Precious realized that closure doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Like walking away. Like choosing yourself over people who've proven they don't deserve you. Sometimes closure looks like freedom. Is forgiving family always necessary, or are there some betrayals that don't deserve reconciliation? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this story is about to show you what a real happy ending looks like. Make sure you're subscribed because the epilogue is going to prove that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that their opinions become irrelevant. 6 months can change everything. 6 months can transform a woman who was once told she wasn't enough into a force that the world can't ignore. Precious's tech company didn't just survive. It exploded. The IPO was one of the most successful of the year. Financial analysts called it the surprise of the decade. Business journals scrambled to tell her story. And there she was on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Entrepreneur magazine, standing tall in a power suit that cost more than Donovan's monthly car payment. The headline: "From Betrayal to Billions, the CEO who turned pain into power." But the magazines didn't tell the whole story. They didn't show the early mornings when she'd wake up at 5 a.m. to review investor presentations before making breakfast for Celeste and Cameron. They didn't capture the moments when doubt crept in, when she wondered if she was doing enough, being enough. They didn't see Elliot standing beside her in the quiet moments, reminding her that she'd already conquered the impossible. The twins were thriving. Celeste had joined the school choir and discovered she had a voice that could fill a room. Cameron had made the soccer team and scored the winning goal in their championship game. Precious was there for both moments, cheering louder than any parent in the stands. These were the moments Donovan's family said she'd never have. These were the children they claimed she'd never deserve. And Elliot? He wasn't just her partner in business anymore. He'd become her partner in life. The proposal came on a quiet evening, nothing like the ostentatious display Donovan had orchestrated years ago. Just the two of them on the rooftop of their office building, overlooking the city they were conquering together. When he got down on one knee, he didn't ask her to complete him. He told her she'd inspired him to become better. Real love. Real partnership. Built on respect, trust, and the kind of equality Precious had once believed was a fairy tale. But here's the thing about rising: you get to see everything beneath you fall. Donovan's company filed for bankruptcy 3 months after Precious's IPO. Turns out, ego doesn't pay the bills and reputation doesn't impress investors when your business model is built on shortcuts and borrowed credibility. The clients he'd stolen? They came back to Precious, apologizing, begging for second chances. Some she took back. Others she politely declined. She didn't need revenge. The market had delivered justice far more poetically than she ever could. And then came the messages. First from Donovan's mother, Margaret. Then from Richard. Long, rambling texts and emails about healing and moving forward as a family. They wanted to meet the twins. They wanted to make amends. They'd seen the magazine covers, of course. They'd heard about the IPO. Suddenly, the woman they'd called barren, the woman they'd deemed unworthy of their son, was worthy of their attention. Precious read each message carefully. She didn't respond in anger. She didn't draft paragraph after paragraph explaining their cruelty, their complicity, their cowardice. She simply wrote, I appreciate you reaching out, but I've built a life that no longer has room for people who only see my value when the world does. I wish you well. And before we continue, if this story has resonated with you, if Precious's journey has touched something in your soul, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, stories about women who refuse to be broken, need to be told. And I've got so many more to share with you. She was at peace. Not the fragile kind of peace that shatters when someone says the wrong thing. The deep, unshakable kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to apologize for it. On a bright Saturday morning, Precious stood in a park with Elliot and the twins. The camera crew had asked for one final interview, one last moment to close out the documentary that was being made about her meteoric rise. She agreed, but only on her terms. No boardroom. No corporate backdrop. Just her family, and the simple truth. She looked directly into the camera, her voice steady, her eyes clear. They tried to define me by what I couldn't give them. But I learned something along the way. I was never empty. They were. They looked at me and saw a vessel, a means to an end, a woman whose only value was tied to her biology. I was always whole. I was always enough. I just needed to believe it. She paused, glancing at Elliot, who stood a few feet away with the twins, giving her space but offering silent support. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's not about making them suffer or watching them fall, though I won't lie, there's a certain poetry in how things unfolded. The best revenge is becoming so whole, so complete, so undeniably successful that their opinion becomes irrelevant. They don't get to define you anymore. You've moved so far beyond their small-minded judgments that they can't even see you from where they're standing. Just then little Celeste tugged on her hand, her bright eyes full of innocent excitement. "Mama, can we go play?" Precious looked down at her daughter. This beautiful, smart, vibrant little girl who'd been used as a weapon against her, who'd been told she wasn't really hers. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that held 1,000 victories. "Yes, baby. We can do anything." As Precious walked away from the camera, hand in hand with her daughter, Cameron racing ahead with Elliot chasing behind him, the narrator's voice returned one final time. Sometimes the life you lose was the wrong one. Sometimes betrayal isn't the end. It's the violent, painful beginning of something legendary. Precious didn't just survive. She didn't just rebuild. She became unstoppable. She became the woman she was always meant to be, the one who'd been buried under other people's expectations and limitations. And in the end, that's the greatest victory of all. Not proving them wrong, but becoming so magnificently right that their wrongness doesn't even register anymore. What would you have done in Precious's position? Would you have forgiven Donovan's family? Would you have let them back into your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of your own strength, subscribe for more stories that celebrate the resilience of women who refuse to be broken.